Everyone in the room, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Everyone virtually, also welcome. Good afternoon or good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Before I turn it over to our co-chairs and our speakers, just very briefly, wanted to introduce myself and SID-United States if you're not familiar with us. My name is Malika Randivi. I am a program coordinator with SID-US, and I work very closely with all three co-chairs in putting on these wonderful events. So I'm very glad that you guys are here, and I really appreciate it. Today's event is co-hosted by the Digital Development Work Group and the Young Professionals in Development Working Network. And as I mentioned, just a little bit about today's event and SID-US. For our in-person attendees, you guys are the lucky few that get to have a happy hour with us on our rooftop. And huge thank you to our sponsors for the happy hour, DAI and Dev Results. And so we're very grateful that you guys have joined us today. A little bit about SID-United States, if you're not familiar with us, we are the largest and the most active chapter of the Society for International Development, which is an international network that was founded in 1957 to serve as a global forum dedicated to sustainable economic, social, and political development. We serve as a global town square for the international development community, bringing together people from diverse organizations, disciplines, and career stages in a neutral, independent forum to share information and discuss important issues and challenges that are facing our community as we are doing today. There are different ways that you can get involved with us. You can look up our upcoming events. We have a few other events coming up in the next couple months and the next couple weeks and months. And you can sign up for a weekly newsletter at our website, which is SID-US.org. You can also join us at our annual dinner, which is happening on November 15th at the Washington Hilton. Or you can volunteer with us to be a co-chair as our co-chairs today, or a work group or network associate. And you can also follow us on social media. Our handle is SID United States, one word, on all platforms. So you can follow us and engage with us. A few housekeeping rules for today. This is a recorded session and it will be shared publicly. We do have closed captioning available and you can turn it on in your own individual settings. If you have any questions for our speakers today, please make sure to post them in the chat box. We will try to make sure, or the speakers will try to make sure they can answer as many as possible, but we are pressed for time, so just making sure, apologies in advance if we're not able to. And with that, I will turn it over to our speakers from the two different work group and network that are co-hosting this event. Asad Nanavati.
Yeah, thanks, Malvika. And thank you to everyone joining virtually and in person. We're really excited about this. And on behalf of INTA, myself, Joseph, Sean, Samim, from the Digital Development Co-working Group, as well as from the Young Professional Network, we're really excited to have this panel with led by Nick Martin and our other panelists. In general, the way that we kind of started this, the nexus of this event was really to understand our personal journeys and your personal journeys and how we can get to where you want to get to in your careers within the digital development sector. I think for me personally, it's always been kind of a thing that I've struggled with, given that the international development space is not a very linear kind of trajectory if you compare it to some of the more traditional career paths like medicine or engineering or law. But that's also kind of what brings us all together and makes it very unique in a way that we can work across our sector. So I'm really excited to hear about the panelists and their personal journeys. And I'll hand it over to Nick.
Thank you so much, Asad, and thanks for convincing me to do this. Hello to everybody in the room and hello to everybody online. My name is Nick, CEO of TechChange. This is my first live event moderating since my wife and I had a baby 5 weeks ago. So I might be kind of like, thank you, tripping out to phantom cries as we go. No, really excited about the event today. This is a topic very close to my heart. And of course, long-time friend and partner of SID-US. We help support them with their annual conference and have done a number of events over the years with SID. So y'all are in the right place. So today what we're going to do is spend about half an hour on some questions that we as a group came up with. I'm going to try and keep things pretty snappy, and then we'll hopefully have 15 or so minutes for you all to ask some questions. I want to make sure that those who are watching online are able to ask those questions as well as those folks in the room. This is a true hybrid event. I've got two speakers here next to me, and then I've got two online, and we're going to stumble through that in all its glory, okay? So with that, I want to invite maybe the speakers in the room first. I'd like you to share where you currently work and one thing that has been a difference maker in your digital development career journey. And I'm gonna want you to keep it to about a minute or two. We don't want to go too deep. We don't need life stories, but one thing that's made a difference. And then I'm gonna ask you in the second round, what was a total waste of time? Okay, sound good? So why don't we start with you, Dela?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Dela Darji, and I currently work for JSI, Job Snow Inc., as a digital health specialist. And so the one thing that was a difference maker in my career, I would say, is probably my internships and experience abroad. So specifically, I took a service trip to the DR over 10 years ago, teaching English to kindergarten through second grade students at a local community school. And the one thing that I just remember that sort of got me into the field was the kids were so excited to take pictures with us and then look at them on their phone. And it was just such a new technology. So since then, I have always had the hope to use technology and digital tools to change outcomes in health and education. So those are the areas where I'm passionate about.
And what a great story too. That's a fantastic origin story to get us started with. And I want folks who are in the room and online to be thinking about how to follow up with you on those kinds of experiences, maybe questions they might have for you, how to get started on that path. Okay, Andrew, you are over here to my left.
Sure.
Tell us a bit about your work and one thing that's made a big difference in your digital development journey so far.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Andrew Merluzzi. I'm an emerging tech advisor at USAID on the emerging technologies team there. And I think one difference maker for me, so I started off not in this field at all. I went to grad school for neuroscience, completely different. But in school, I had just one very part-time thing doing policy analysis, essentially. There's lots of different kinds of digital development. There's the doing, there's the policy. I ended up more on the policy side of things. But even having just a nothing part-time something to put on my resume that was I'm committed to this topic and I'm interested and I want to.
Yeah, and we are going to go deeper in this session on to grad school or not to grad school. But it sounds like this was really transformative, this kind of side gig that you had in shaping your journey. That's awesome. Okay, Leo, I'm going to come to you next. Leo, would love to have you introduce yourself, and you are virtual, so hopefully we can hear you. Tell us a bit about your work, where you are in your journey, and one thing that has made a big difference in your specifically digital development path so far.
Cool. Thank you, everyone, and it's nice to be joining you virtually. So my name is Leo Senai. I've been working in the digital development space for about 5 years. I'm actually in grad school right now, studying computer science, getting my master's in computer science at Northeastern. But I do some part-time freelance consulting as well in the digital development sector. And for me, I would say the biggest difference maker, positive difference maker, was just communicating my intent. So when I was first trying to once I realized that I wanted to work in the digital development space, I just kind of made it known to people around me, and tried to generate enough buzz that eventually I was able to kind of wiggle my way into the sector. Starting first with doing BD work, so I was doing project management and BD. So I found a small business to support them with their USAID BD work in the digital space.
All right, we're going to ask you more questions about that wiggling as we go. But I want to turn the floor over to Gratiana. Gratiana, same question to you. Tell us a little bit about where you are in your digital development journey and one thing that's made a difference.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So hi everyone, my name is Gratiana, who I am currently working actually as an independent contractor, as a data scientist and ethical AI consultant, previously working at DAI with the Center for Digital Acceleration. I think one thing that has made the biggest difference for me in my career, not specific, I think, to digital development at all, because I'll say I didn't really know anything about digital development when I started working, but was having some really great mentors in the field who kind of helped me find my way and really advocated for me in ways that I never, I think, asked them to. And I think currently working independent, I've always been really appreciative now when I talk to potential clients or folks in the industry who say that they've kind of heard about me from some of my mentors and heard about my work. And I think that has made a huge difference for me and the work that I've been able.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I do hope we have some time today to talk a little bit more about how you find mentors. What is an organic process by which you identify and build rapport with these types of folks who are more experienced in our sector and others as we go, but that's a wonderful point to share. All right, so now we're gonna flip the script and we're going to go back. We're gonna ask each of these panelists, what was a dead end? What was a total waste of time? What did you think was going to yield results, but in fact the opposite? Is there anything that sticks out to you in your journey that you would look back and say, oh, go back and tell my younger self not to have done this? Dela, you ready? Who's got something? Yeah?
I can try.
Okay.
So I think the biggest thing I stressed about were this time I took to try to find that perfect job or like the ideal role right after finishing grad school. And stressing about the time it took to, get to that place, because I think right after finishing grad school, it took me 7 months to find like my first job. And at that point, I just took like whatever came at me. It was it was still in public health, which is what I went to school for, but in health informatics, I didn't even know what that was at the time. So I think that was the biggest like waste of time for me, was just stressing about the time it would take to like get there, because eventually just trusting that it would work out.
A lot of nodding heads
Yeah,
over
I was
here,
like,
so it sounds like it's resonating a little bit.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I think that's what I would tell my,
Okay,
No.
okay, what would you add to that, Andrew?
I think for me, the biggest waste of time was, I guess, the misconception I had that like it would be a good idea to apply to like 1 million jobs online, just like sending my resume into the ether and hoping that would work.
Yeah.
And I think really what works is just like getting to know people and building relationships. And obviously like in government, that's harder to do because there are like very strict ways that people can get hired in government. But lots of other organizations, like someone gives you a good recommendation, that can go like 90% of the way there.
Yeah, we tend to spin our wheels a lot applying for every job we can, rather than maybe spending that same amount of time being intentional about which organizations, how to network, how to build some of those relationships. And of course, there's a lot of frustration that builds when you get rejected over and over again for these automatic services. So I hope we can talk a little bit more about some of those strategies as we go, but I think that's a great point. Okay, Leo, over to you. What was a total waste of time?
Sure, thank you. Both of those points, by the way, definitely resonate with me as well. But what I would add is, so I mentioned that what was a big difference maker was communicating my intent. And part of that is like you realize kind of who's interested in what you're offering. And so for me, the biggest waste of time was just kind of waiting, sitting in a job and like waiting for an opportunity to come up or waiting for a change. And that, basically isn't always promised. So sometimes when you tell people I want to do more digital work or something like that, and they're like, okay, sit tight, stay in your role, but maybe we'll find something in like 5 months. And then for me, that never really materialized. I had to kind of go and chase it and just do it and find people that wanted that now and find those jobs through the process of networking. So don't like wait around. I mean, this might make some people feel uncomfortable, but don't trust your employers when they say stick around and maybe it'll come. I think you gotta kind of take a little bit more initiative.
It can be hard though. It depends on the size of the organization, large and small, how you are proactive in your early career roles about seeking more opportunity, more responsibility. That can be a tricky dance. You want to do your job and do it well and don't want to step on toes, but at the same time, the job you have currently might not be the job you want. So I think that's a great point. Okay, Gratiana, anything that you would add to this conversation about dead ends, waste of time in your journey that looking back, you would not do the same?
I think I would echo what Dela said about like kind of just stressing about the unknown. I think I don't regret any of the jobs or think that any of the jobs that I've had were wastes of time, but I definitely spent a lot of time thinking that they were wastes of time or thinking that they weren't right for me. I'm not a planner by any means, and a lot of people tell you that you should have like a 1 year, a 5 year, a 10-year career goal. And for me, that has always been something that has, I'll be honest, been really, really difficult to pin down to be like, yes, I want to be here in 5 or 10 years. But where I am now, I think 5 years ago, I would never have predicted that I'm doing the things that I'm currently doing. And I just wish that I hadn't spent so much time back then stressing about all the things that I'm doing right now. And especially in digital development, where there are new technologies, new job descriptions, just new things coming out all the time. It's kind of hard to predict where you're going to be in the next year, the next 5 years. And yeah, I think I wish I just hadn't spent so much time thinking about all that.
I really can't stand that question when it's usually boomers. They ask older, where are you going to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be? It's a hard thing to answer. I do think, especially if you factor in the context of the pandemic, so much can change. That's out of our control. So how do we, I don't know, be kinder to ourselves, build more adaptive and flexible mindsets? That seems to be a better approach than kind of these 5 and 10-year plans. Okay, we've started to talk a little bit about how one builds skills and knowledge, relationships in digital development. It's a very specialized sector. I want to hear from each of you what recommendations you'd have for the folks who are joining us about how you did and how you would recommend in 2023 building some of those skills. Grad school always comes up in these conversations. Is it worth it? It's a lot of money, it's a lot of time. Are there other ways that you think are successful for building the skill sets needed for what is a very technical, specifically technical and kind of niche discipline? What would you do right now if you were trying to make some of these decisions? Let's mix it up a little bit. Leo, I might start with you. What do you think?
Sure. I think that's a great question, and like there's tons of different roles within the digital development sector, whether it's from management to being like a developer yourself or something like that, right? So I think it comes down to kind of what role you envision for yourself and what you're interested in. For me, like I mentioned already, I'm in grad school studying computer science. And I explored, there's a lot of like master's programs for like digital development. There's a few, I think one in the UK, like I think University of Colorado had one. I found that to be insufficient after a couple of years, like working in the digital development sector. I wanted to be sure that like as a technologist and as an aspiring technologist, I really knew what I was talking about. I really understood what like the software development life cycle is like, or really understood kind of what like AI is at a like building a model at a mathematical level. I think if you want to be a technical person, you really have to be willing to kind of do that. But it's not for everyone, and like there's tons of other ways you can do it. I mean, I worked in and continue to work a lot in like the business development or project management side of things. So it kind of depends. I have no regrets about kind of quitting and going into full-time master's science in comp sci.
I love your journey because I think about it a lot. You were on the BD side, already in the industry, and then you say, all right, I'm going to take a step back. I want to build more technical expertise, do a pretty serious, hardcore technical master's program. I'm really excited to see what you decide to do once you're done with this, but I appreciate you sharing there. Dela, what about you? How are you thinking about skills building? What's made a difference for you? What would you recommend folks do in 2023 here?
Yeah, definitely. So I actually knew that I wanted to be in the international development, like space and global health. I didn't know how I was gonna get there, but I knew like that was the general area I wanted to go in. So I went to grad school right after undergrad. And I don't think there is no correct answer whether you go to grad school or not, but I think the important piece is focusing on just finding those opportunities of whether it's internships or volunteer or joining like a community or network, doing the work that you enjoy, finding mentors. I think getting the transferable skills is so much more important than whether you decide to go to grad school or not, because I think when you get those key transferable skills through whatever experience, that is going to apply to any like workplace or job that you have in the future.
Great, those are great points there. Gratiana, how are you thinking about this? Where do you land on how one builds a skills portfolio in 2023?
So I, similar to Dela, went straight from undergrad into grad school, and I kind of regret it a little bit. There are times where I'm currently working and thinking it would actually be really nice to go back to school right now, because there are some things that I've learned and more interests that I have really focused in on through my work that I wish that I could explore a little bit more now. I think I have come to the philosophy with grad school a little bit, coming from a very American perspective, that if you have the means, or if someone else is paying for you to go to grad school, go to grad school. Sometimes I just kind of debate whether the cost, honestly, of grad school nowadays is equivalent to what you can sometimes gain out of just going straight into a job and getting some work experience. I think there are times now where I think about my interest in kind of ethical AI, and at the time when I was going to grad school, there really wasn't that much kind of academic opportunities in that sector, and now that AI has really grown, those opportunities are now there. So I do think that is also a big piece of the consideration of school or not school, is as the technology grows, the opportunities in academics grow and whatnot. I think on the skills building piece, I will say as a data scientist, it helps to have access to kind of more of the online courses. Those things I think are becoming a lot more accessible for learning how to code and learning about just basic statistics and whatnot. And those have been really helpful for me as I've continued through my career to just continue to do and make sure that my skills don't just kind of sit there. So I would definitely recommend that as a big piece, even if you do or don't go to grad school.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up a good point, and I say this as a longtime professor at Columbia. Grad schools, the most famous ones especially, are always a couple years behind the times. They're trying hard to keep up, but when we talk about our niche in particular, you know, they're powered by adjuncts like Asit and I and others who teach, you know, and so it's difficult to get what I would call kind of like a canonical digital development experience in a fancy grad school. However, as Gratiana points out, there are so many great online courses and resources, some of which even shameless plug, TechChange has supported over the many years that we've been running them, that give you, I think, more tactical skills, better relationships, and like a state of play in the moment at like a fraction of the cost. So whether it's something you supplement with the traditional grad school curriculum or something that you do instead of, I think that's definitely something worth considering. Andrew, how are you thinking about this? Anything you'd like to add or share based on your journey?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a couple things is like Gratiana sort of mentioned this, but like we also, you know, we haven't really discussed like what the demand side, like employers do look for higher degrees, like that's just
They want them.
a reality.
Yeah.
Like that's annoying because as you say, like, there are a ton of things online that would actually possibly prepare you better, right? But there's that fact at the end of the day. So to me, like the way that I would think about it now, like if I were starting out, like, trying to decide whether to go to school right now, and I really wanted to be in digital development, I think I would try to go to school if I could, grad school, and like get a degree. But I also think I would treat grad school as like, yes, I'm here to do classes and that's my part-time job. And another part-time job is like doing the networking, like just looking at job postings and then trying to find people at those organizations to see what their day-to-day is like and what skills they are missing, and then try to hone those skills. Like the school part of it would just be like just a minor player.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And it kind of takes us to our next question. I asked this group in our pre-meeting, what emerging tech or aspects of digital development they are most excited about. And it connects here, right? Like, in apps that you're seeing, like what are the hot skills in demand? And also kind of you personally, what are you excited about as your journey unfolds at the stage of your careers? Who wants to go first?
I can go.
All right, Andrew, tell us.
I guess,
Yeah, what do you think?
I mean, for me, so what our team works on at USAID, and the thing that I'm most excited about is like the socio-technical piece of technology, right? So not just about emerging tech, but all the other stuff that goes into the technology that is designed by certain people for certain purposes, deployed in a certain context for certain people with certain ramifications. Like all of those things are the things that I think are really exciting. And not a lot of that has to do with like, for instance, me, like I don't build AI models on my day-to-day basis. Like I read and I write, like those are the skills that, and I interview people, like those are the skills that are valuable. And those are the things that like happen to get me really excited rather than like focusing on a particular technology.
Okay. I love that. Let's hear from Dela. What do you think? What is there a specific technology that you are excited about? How would you answer this question?
Yeah, my answer is kind of similar to Andrew.
Okay.
So, while it's easy to get caught up, I think in like the newest technology or you know, what the latest thing that's out there, I think like my true passion lies in just the people that are going to use the technology or who you're hoping to impact. So the population and the needs are different based on who you're working with and where you're working. So I think while I'm excited about all the possibilities that tech and data will bring, I'm excited to help them choose the right technology that's for them, because sometimes they may not need the one that's, you know, the most expensive or has the most functionality. So yeah, my focus is on like the user experience or the population you're serving.
I'm trying to just get them to say AI. So thoughtful. These
I thought
answers are
everyone
way
would
too
say
thoughtful,
AI.
so I apologize. Okay, Leo, how are you thinking about this?
So the question is like exciting emerging tech. So I guess two things I would say. So definitely echoing what was just said by both our panelists. If you're not familiar with the principles for digital development, you should be if you want to work in the sector. I'm a big advocate of it, and like if you've ever played sports or music or something, like it's about the fundamentals. And frankly, having worked with implementers a lot, like we're still not getting the fundamentals right. And I think like if I could just do one thing, it's just advocate on that and make sure that people are sticking to it. But from a technology perspective, I think I'm not sure if I'm excited about it, but like what keeps me up at night and really like propels my career is around kind of like digital rights, issues around digital rights, and really like kind of safeguarding civil society from making sure that they can continue to organize and say what we got to say and hold people accountable and advocate for transparency, and any kind of technology around that is I think really worth fighting for and learning about.
I'm really glad, Leo, that you mentioned the principles of digital development. I do think for those that are totally new to digital development, it's a great place to start. I use it in my class to teach, and I do find and maybe and I guess Dela too, a little bit, those of you who are in larger organizations doing digital development work, you're on defense a lot. You're trying to kind of convince the program manager that knows nothing about tech, that maybe this blockchain solution is such a good idea. So it's a framework that you can share with them that has a backing and all kinds of organizations that endorse. But it's a great tool to have in your back pocket, and I think a good starting point. Would you say that's accurate, Inta?
I talked about blockchain yesterday. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say.
Gratiana, anything you'd add here? How are you thinking about this?
I'll be the one that says AI. Um, as someone who semi-frequently builds AI tools, it is fun to see just what kind of technologies are coming out. I will say this is a little bit stereotypical, but ChatGPT, not because of the technology itself, but more because of the kind of the after effects and its consequences, I think is really exciting. I think before ChatGPT came out, there was still a pretty like base level understanding of what AI could do in the public sphere. And it was a lot of like, AI will take over the world, AI will take our jobs kind of thing. And that most everyone has access to what it really can and cannot do. I think is it's just kind of boosting overall public knowledge of AI. And I think it's really pushing policymakers and more of the regulators to kind of do something about generative AI. Because now I think we're seeing like more big tech companies are coming out with kind of their own watermarks or regulations around AI generated speech or AI generated images. And I think those didn't really come up until the tool came out, which is a little bit unfortunate. And I'm glad that if there was anything to kind of spur that it exists.
Yeah, a lot of great thoughts there around how this AI revolution is affecting our sector. And I hope folks who are excited about that can follow up with you specifically, or we can go a little bit deeper in the Q&A on this. But thank you, Gratiana. So my last question for this esteemed panel, we talked a bit in our planning session about digital development career pathways. What does it look like to be a digital development officer and grow in an organization, large, small, funder, private sector, and so forth? So I've asked each of them maybe if they would share a few words about that, how they're thinking about the trajectory that they're on, and others are on in this sector. Who is ready to kick us off?
I can start.
Okay, Andrew, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like career pathways, like varied and numerous.
And you might, maybe it's worth on this one talking a bit about USAID's digital development journey, the team, the digital strategy. I think for folks that may be interested in a government career, this could be a good time to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. So with technology division at USAID, it's like 65, 70 people, I think. It's grown in the last 10 years from like, 10 people. As the technology has matured and that kind of thing. And I think in terms of like how people get into government, there's a couple of obvious things, and then some pathways that I think are probably more difficult, such as like just applying on USA jobs. That's a very hard prospect. But some common ways, so for people who are scientists, got a best thing to do for, that's how I got in. It was just like a thing I was looking at in my future for a long time. You get a master's degree, you're then eligible for the Presidential Management Fellowship, PMF, sort of a difficult program to get into, but again, a very obvious way that people like with some technical background end up in government. And so those two programs, like in particular, I would say like keep your eye on if you intend to go to grad school. I have less information about if you didn't go to grad school because I did, so I was only paying attention to those things. But in my view, like the kind of career pathways thing has a lot to do with like you just identifying what your value is. Like for me, I was noticing in grad school, like I'm actually not that good of a researcher, if I'm honest. Like doing science is not for me, but I'm a good project manager. Like people needed help like getting their stuff done on time and like making sure we put out a high quality product. Like I can help them with that. And that was just like a thing I was picking up along the way, and then that was how I advertised myself, right? Like that was the thing that I was like, oh, I can tell here, whatever, it sounds like you're very busy and very stressed out. Like a thing that I really like doing, and I think I'm good at, is project management. And so just like doing your own little gap analysis for an organization, like what are they struggling with, and kind of build up skills to try to like fill that niche.
I like to, about your story, it requires some self-awareness to be able to say, I'm good at this, but I'm not good at this, and really trying to be honest with oneself early in your journey, whether it's in grad school or whether it's in your first job, about the things you're good at and the things you like, the things you don't like, the things you're not good at, trying to map those intentionally. That's great, Andrew. Dela, what about you? Career pathways. You're currently at JSI. There's a large focus on digital health, digital development at JSI. How would you add to this conversation?
Yeah, so I think one thing I do want to point out is I just started at JSI about a year ago.
Okay.
Before that, I was working on the domestic side for a state health department for the last like almost 7 years.
Wow. Okay.
So while I always wanted to work in international development and digital health and global health, it wasn't straightforward, and I didn't get there right away. And so, like I said, after spending like those 7 months finding my first job, I ended up getting a role with the state health department. And at the time, I was like, oh, I'm going to stay for like a year or two and then leave. It was just my intern job. But I ended up getting the opportunity to manage like the disease reporting system for COVID, like in New Jersey.
Cool.
And you can't plan for these things. So I think like just the pathway, being open to opportunities that you may not feel like, I don't know if this is, or I'm qualified, or I don't know if this is the right path for me. So I think just being open to that, because you never know what's going to come up. And lastly, to close, I always think of the Steve Jobs quote. It's like, you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backward. So now I'm like, oh, well, I had to go through that to like get to JSI now. Like that's what brought me here. So
makes sense in hindsight.
So yeah, I think just a different perspective, hopefully that helps.
Well, and I think your comment rhymes with Leo's earlier comment about being a little more proactive, seeking out opportunity when you do get that first entry level job, rather than waiting for your bosses to tell you how and where to apply digital to your work. Yeah, that's great. Leo, over to you. When you think about career pathways, either at some of the orgs you've worked with or in your current journey, what advice would you have for folks?
Yeah, I had a pretty roundabout way to where I'm at. For me, I think upon reflection, I would say, I really believed in like trying to solve other people's problems, and kind of doing like work that like, I think it was said earlier, but like doing work that like maybe folks might not necessarily want to do, but will get you closer to where you want to be, right? Might not be the dream job, but it's an inch closer. So for example, for me, that example is like, I wanted to do like a technical digital development job, but I got an opportunity leveraging my BD experience working at Chemonics to do like BD for a humanitarian custom software company, right, that wanted USAID contracts. And so I did that, was exposed to the software development process and got to think about digital development full time. And then that got me into like a more technical position later on. So just think about ways you can leverage your skills and offer it to people who need them.
I think it's a good point to bring up. BD is usually the entry point to getting into the international development sector. It's usually they hire for most jobs. Implementers in particular will hire folks, with a range of skill sets. Requires good writing, good attention to a number of folks, like you mentioned, kind of accept the business development role and then parlay that into a more technical. Did you do that as well?
Yeah.
So that does happen a lot. Now, it can be a longer journey, and so we might put you on the spot and ask you if you have any advice here after hearing from Gratiana. But yeah, that is something to think about. Are you willing to spend a couple of years writing proposals, working on a business development team, understanding the sector, building that skill set as you develop a more technical skill set and maybe get closer to something you're slightly more passionate about, which is an option. Gratiana, what about you? Anything here?
one's a hard one, mainly because I never anticipated myself going independent. I will say I started at a pretty large implementing organization, and I had no idea what I was doing or what opportunities were available originally. And I think that time there really gave me the chance to do a bunch of different things. Because it was so large, there were so many different projects and so many different kind of activities and that I could work on. And I think I personally used that time to hone in on what it was that I really enjoyed working on. And at the end of my tenure at the organization, I was kind of at a point where I knew exactly what I really liked to work on, and I wanted to be able to do that more, which is why I went independent. I don't know if that exactly is a good lesson for anyone, but that worked for me, and I'm hoping to keep doing that.
Hey, all journeys are valid. I think that's beautiful. I'm going to invite folks online and in person to start thinking about your questions for this group of panelists. And then as we're waiting for some to come in, Inta, I'm going to come to you. So we just talked about the kind of journey from business development to technical. Anything else you'd add to this conversation that hasn't been touched on yet?
My whole career path has been an accident. International development was an accident. Digital development was an accident. So for me, I went from also a larger implementer doing pure BD with no digital tie-in at all to just wanting to get a new job, and ended up the first company that was willing to hire me was a smaller company that was doing digital development work. And so that's kind of how I got into it. So from my perspective, it was really about kind of seizing the opportunities that were in front of me and kind of not being so linear in my own thinking that I was able to just take other opportunities kind of as they came along. So who knows where you'll end up.
Well, certainly a theme that we're hearing from a few folks today, that kind of adaptability to run with whatever's in front of you and to solve problems to advance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
All right, we're gonna kind of conclude my question portion of this experience and hear from a few folks who are both in the room and online. So I have, I think, at least one, maybe two questions online that I can run with. But let's, are there folks in the room that would like to share a question with this group? Okay, Carolina.
One question, building on our discussion around mentors, if you could share your ways on how to seek out mentorships and then build that relationship in an organic way. Great.
Let's do it. I think, was it you, Gratiana, who talked about mentorship? I think it was, right? Do you want to take this one and go a bit deeper on how you found some of those mentors and how you continued to engage them as your journey evolved, such that they were in your corner for tough decisions and various milestones?
Yeah. I will say the first person that comes to mind was actually my direct manager at my old job. So that was kind of a required relationship, if I might say. But it was one that I really appreciated, and I think was able to, through I think like 3.5, 4 years of being at the company, to just develop that kind of relationship where I felt comfortable, and they made it comfortable for me to approach them with just general questions about my career path, about what it was that I wanted to do. I think other mentors that I have found have just kind of come up through my work, through different projects that I've worked on. I think there are really smart people who have been working in the field for a long time, pretty much in any development organization. And sometimes it may take a little bit of work to dig through directories and look through blog posts, who's writing the things that you're really interested in, to find them. But I think there are people out there. Sometimes it takes a little bit more work than others. Say.
I get asked this a lot on LinkedIn, and the only thing I would add, Gratiana, which I think is a great answer, is really think about the value that you are going to bring to them. right? Oftentimes when we think about mentors, we think about, okay, who's going to bestow me with the wisdom of the experience of the industry? But the reality is that we're all a little bit transactional about the things we are wanting to learn and the things that we want for ourselves. And so really trying to nail down your value proposition as you, and again, build these relationships organically, no big overtures. Please, will you be my mentor? Like we have to really flex the like gradual incremental relationship building muscles to feel like this is a natural journey, but hopefully that helps. Sure. Okay, I'm gonna go to an online question and then somebody else in this room hopefully is ready with their next question. I think it's Parisa. You're asking, what technical skills do you use in the day-to-day of your current roles? Andrew, I'm gonna come to you on this, and then Dela, if you have a strong feeling on this one, we can go to you or we can keep moving. Andrew, what's a day-to-day look like for you?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's gonna vary a lot at USAID, but for me, a lot of what we do is we are, you know, maybe commissioning research on something, we're commissioning a project on something. I might go like a month and a half, 2 months without thinking about that project at all. And then all of a sudden there's something I have to read and respond to. So a huge, like, and this is a skill that I'm still building at USAID, is just like getting spun up on something really quickly and having something intelligent to say about it on short notice. Like that's a really difficult thing. And it's, yeah, like I said, I think I'm still learning how to do, but I think like it's less technical and it's more just like always like keeping your head on a swivel and knowing that at any given time you're going to be juggling a ton of different things, and just to like take a breath and be comfortable with the fact that that's the reality. I think that's a big one. I mean, another one that's more specific to our team is like I mentioned earlier, we're not in the business of building AI models ourselves, but we are often in the business of sort of interpreting the results that someone else has come up with. Consumers of technical topics, even if we are not ourselves like building those particular tools. And that means just like, you know, remaining on top of the field, like understanding what are the advances, understanding like what are some new ethical issues that are cropping up and how might that transfer over to this project. Like it's just a ton of reading, honestly.
And I would imagine going to industry events, a lot of the stuff is freely available online to be able to do that kind of research to skill up. But I think those are great pieces of advice. Okay, let's one or two more questions and I'll get Dela and Leo into the conversation here. What else we have from the audience here? What are we thinking about?
Can
Yes.
I jump off that question?
Yes, you sure can.
Are there any foundational information areas, authors that anyone would suggest starting out for that reading? As someone who, I mean, everyone's writing about AI and what it's going to do next, and you never know if you can actually trust everyone and everything out there. Where would you start as a credible source to start snowballing that information?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about AI in particular. I'll just name a couple, but you can also connect afterward and I can point you in the direction of other things. You know, when we're talking about like digital development, how artificial intelligence is used across the world, there's an outlet called Rest of World, which is pretty new as in the last couple of years. It's a journalistic outfit, but they are just investigating these questions of like, how is technology being used in developing countries, deployed by whom, designed by whom, like really getting at the meat of it. So that's a great one just to stay on top of like, what are they thinking about? In terms of more technical things, there's a newsletter called Import AI, which is written by Jack Clark, who's at Anthropic now, just very technical stuff about machine learning research, but like distilled in a way that's really useful. Those are two, but yeah, happy to connect and suggest others.
Leo, what do you think? You're in school right now and you've thought a lot about this, I'm sure, from many angles. What are some sources beyond the principles of digital development, which I think was a great suggestion, that you would recommend?
I mean, I'm drawing off on a blank. I mean, I read textbooks. just my tech. Depends if it's a technical issue. Find like, especially in like, I feel like in the computer science space, there's a lot of like kind of holy grail textbooks for a lot of things. So I'd look into that.
Yeah,
plug like rest of the world, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Dela,
Kind
any
of
thoughts?
depends on the topic.
Yeah, specifically tech related, I'm drawing a blank as well, but I know like I'm on some like, just specific to like global health and informatics, which is like very, and I know DevX has like a lot of,
Yeah.
articles that you could sign up for the listserv.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would recommend Kat Cheney at DevX. She's the writer that covers the tech beat. I would recommend going to Global Digital Development Forum. Happens to be a TechChange event, but I'm still gonna say it anyway. All the sessions that we've recorded from around the world are free and open. You can watch industry leaders kind of give latest and greatest presentations. There's a Global Digital Health Forum coming up in December. You can go and attend and experience some of this. And then I would get on LinkedIn, and I know again I'm here a bit biased because I love LinkedIn, but there's a few lists that I've put together of responsible AI ethicists. There are lists of ICT4D professionals in the field who are posting shorter tactical posts on projects at their organizations, on reflections on things happening in the macro. And I think if you create a little bit of a news filter, you can kind of really stay on top of things in an effective way. Couple that with some of the journal and more technical sources, have a nice balance of state of play in the sector. So hopefully that helps. Yeah, Inta, what else you got?
I would also add to the principles for digital development to start just knowing the inside and out. And I think a lot of the people in this room are gonna end up somewhere in the USAID ecosystem, either at USAID directly or at an implementing partner. So the USAID digital strategy and the digital ecosystem framework would be critical if you're gonna get into that world.
One thing that I found foundational in my career was a textbook by Richard Heeks on ICT4D. It's a little old probably now, but
It is a little old, but it's good.
yeah, it's really, if you're looking at foundational technology, like how this sector has kind of evolved, I find it to be quite an interesting opportunity. But yeah, like I said, it's
Lots of good ideas.
a little old.
It's great though. Yeah. All right, we have time for one more question. Anybody in the room? I don't see any coming in from online. Last burning question.
The question is about balance, right? And what do I mean by this? So I'm just speaking from my own experience, but I feel like this generally does apply. I feel like a lot of people that end up in the development sector do so because they're very attracted by like the mission of kind of, helping people that need to fix particular issues and kind of bring some good to the world. Like it's a very mission-driven sector, but oftentimes within the niche of digital development and just working with technologies, like sometimes you can get so technical that you kind of get so mixed up in the mumbo jumbo of the latest technologies and all that, that kind of lose sight a little bit of the mission and kind of like what drove you to join the sector in the first place, right? So I'm just wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about kind of like how you can, I guess, both kind of like really get into the tech whilst also kind of having that bigger picture of like why you're doing the tech in the first place, right? Both like, I guess, like in your day-to-day, but also as you progress through your career.
It's a big question to round us out here, but a great one. I don't know, Dela, if you have thoughts on this, working in global health, like how are you thinking about obviously the COVID work you did, like the humanity of what drives people to these jobs mixed with the kind of technology, which can create a distancing effect or maybe at times be at odds with that notion of connecting on the social impact front?
Yeah, that is a very loaded question. I'll try to take a stab at it. So I think in my specific role, like through the COVID pandemic, I was also always like doing like the data side and like getting everyone to like report data like that we need. But then I also got a chance to interact with the users that were sending us the data. So I think from the beginning, that's why I was saying earlier, focusing on the population is so critical, and it is very hard to like lose sight of that, especially in your day-to-day. But keeping that bigger picture in mind, I think, is going to be what keeps you going. Like I said, the technologies are great, but like ultimately our goal is to, improve lives or help people, and that's what. So really just focusing on the population and like the experience that you're
Beautiful answer there. Okay, I'm gonna of this epic gathering and experience.
Nick, thank you for queuing that up. I'm actually not going to do that because I think that there have been so many really good lessons learned and pieces of information for early career professionals. I just wanted to thank everyone so much for their time and willingness to participate, from Nick, the moderator, to all 4 of the panelists, to everyone here in the room and everyone online who is attending and participating. For those here, there's a happy hour upstairs following this. Certainly for me, feel free to find me on LinkedIn, anyone, if you have any further questions about anything. But thank you all for your time, and we hope that this session added value to everyone here.
Awesome, and thanks to these great panelists again. Awesome job. Join us online. Feel free to follow up with us as things evolve. All right, friends,
Thank you.
to the happy hour.
To the happy hour.